So I'm very happy to introduce our featured speaker, Puneet Kakkar. He's the resident legal advisor to the Gulf region for the United States Embassy, Kuwait. And he is an assistant U.S. attorney in Los Angeles, in California, USA. And he's over here in this region working with his counterparts in Kuwait, Saudi, Bahrain, combating terrorism and illicit finance. He's training people such as prosecutors, investigators, judges, and he's advising on legal reform. So I think we have a lot to discuss with him. We will hear from him first, and then depending how many people are with us at the end of his lecture, we'll either have a group discussion, question, answer, and discussion, or we'll break out into 1 or 2 or 3 small groups in order to have that discussion. And Puneet, will meet with each small group to answer questions and to enter those discussions with people. The reason that when the group is larger, the reason we break into small groups is because some people are more hesitant to speak up when there's a larger group, and we want everyone to feel comfortable and to get their questions answered and to bring up the topics that they feel they would like to discuss. So we'll see how it is when we reach the end of Puneet's presentation, and then we'll decide on whether to break up into small groups or have our Q&A and discussion as one large group. All right, so now I'm very, very much honored and pleased to hand over control of the microphone to Puneet Kakkar. Yay, welcome.
Thank you so much. And Dana, if you don't mind making me a co-host,
yes,
so I can share my slides. So good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank Ms. Dana for inviting me to speak to you. I really appreciate how you said cybersecurity is everyone's part. For me, cybersecurity is part of national security, and so that's why the Department of Justice cares about it. It's why we prosecute cases, and it's why we speak about this. But Dana had asked that I speak a little bit about money laundering, just because I think a lot of people are interested in that. And so what I wanted to do was talk about high-tech money laundering, especially for this audience. We're very technically savvy, and cybercrime and the role of the private sector. Many of you are already the front line of recognizing cyber threats, and you already know that you have a part. And so I'm going to just describe how that part has been crucial in the United States. And again, I think there's always more value in questions. So I'll talk a little bit about cases, about the use of cryptocurrency in illegal settings, which is where we're seeing money laundering as a challenge, and I'll take it from there. Also, this is I wouldn't be an appropriate representative of the Department of Justice if I didn't give the disclaimer that these are my personal views, and not everything that I'm expressing are the views of the Department of Justice, but do come from my experience there. And so they aren't necessarily the views of the DOJ. But that said, let me share my screen to begin my presentation. 1 second. And by way of background, I know that Dana has shared my bio online. I'm a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. My last position there was deputy chief of the International Narcotics and Money Laundering Unit, where we prosecuted large-scale drug cartels from South and Central America, and also dealt with the drug problem as it pertained technologically. Criminals started leveraging cyberspace, which I'll show you, but for me, that made me a quasi-cyber prosecutor. So I'll be talking about some of the cases that I've prosecuted and those of the Department of Justice. So I'm actually going to begin to see how many people are not driving and are able to do a response on Zoom. How many people are familiar with what virtual currency is, like how it works, maybe investing in it, or interested? You could give me like a thumbs up on Zoom or happy face, whatever you want on your buttons. I think 2 years into COVID, this is how I learned how to make sure people are not sleeping on Zoom, is you have to ask people to click a button. So I don't see, I think, Danny, you'll probably be seeing the responses. But I know that I have a very cyber savvy group. So I will spare you from the basics of what virtual currency is, but what I will do is show you kind of how we have seen it. So this comes at an opportune time to talk about because, we're seeing the rise in prominence of virtual currency. We're seeing significant market fluctuations. Just over the weekend, the US dollar value for Bitcoin plummeted, I say plummet, to 43,000 from about $60,000. This is in contrast to when I started working on prosecuting the illegal use of cryptocurrency about 5 years ago, when it was about $600. So I'm going to at least discuss the goals of virtual currency, because at least in the United States, the vantage point that we have taken as prosecutors is cryptocurrency is not inherently illegal. It's not something that the United States has banned, and I think other countries have continued to ban it, and realizing that there's some technological issues there. So at least for the time being, when we consider cryptocurrency not illegal and being used, we think, well, what are the good goals of it? Because there is a technological underpinning. First, as you know, cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, because it relies on a community of people and not by a government or a central economy, it allows people to pay each other directly around the world. You don't deal with payment systems, you don't deal with financial intermediaries, you don't have to deal with US credit cards, KNet, whatever that may be. You can just transfer money directly. All someone needs is a wallet and a cell phone, and an electronic wallet when I say that. We've seen companies in the United States play their employees globally through cryptocurrency because they don't have to deal with payment processors. And then think about where there are no brick and mortar banks, where people don't have access to credit, where people, cannot open a bank because they're a bank account because there's no bank near them. For them, they can get money this way. All they need is a cell phone. Think of a farmer who doesn't have enough to open a bank account, but sells crops and will accept Bitcoin. But then I'm going to talk at least now some of the popular developments we're seeing. One is non-fungible tokens, and the other is, which is basically property rights in transferring. So, and I'll show an example of this shortly. It allows people to signify ownership by just moving a token, and that physical object may be somewhere else. I have friends, for example, who lease out their apartments based on non-fungible tokens using the Ethereum blockchain, because they just pre-code conditions, like what are the requirements to meet. And if you've met them, you get access to a place, you've satisfied a contract, you get funding, whatever it may be. And then the other hot topic is this technology is used for decentralized finance. So why have to go to a bank to get a loan and fill out an application where I can put up my own collateral with someone simply through a cryptocurrency? There's a blockchain. The way the blockchain works is everyone has access to it. The software only works as if you satisfy conditions. And so if I have basically through a computer program satisfied certain conditions, I get money released to me automatically. Think of it like a vending machine. You put in certain dollars, the vending machine knows that you have put the right amount and gives you a product. That is how decentralized finance works. It's straight to the consumer and straight to the marketer. Here's the example of what I was talking about, the non-fungible token. Let's say you have a painting in the Louvre and you want to signify ownership of it. Nobody ever is really going to drag the painting to your house, but there usually is a display of ownership. And so now you have these tokens that people are now putting on the blockchain saying, this is the ownership. And the people who truly own it have the private key to transfer it. And so again, I'm not going over the basics of cryptocurrency because many in the audience have that, but it's basically your own little password to move a token on the blockchain. So these are the positive prospects that we're seeing of virtual currency. But I'm here today to at least tell you about how these virtual currencies have been used illegally and why we care as prosecutors, why we care as the United States about these technologies used improperly. So because of the anonymous nature of cryptocurrency, and I'll give you, just as many of you know, There is no institution, there is no bank. It is just a public address that the whole internet sees. That's the most of ownership you show to the world, is a public address. Nobody knows that it's your address, only you do, or a bank that you register it with. But because of that anonymous nature, we've seen it used in these illegal contexts: terrorism, child pornography, drugs that are sold over the darknet, and ransomware, which I know many in this group have had the unfortunate task of dealing with. So here's, at least for those who have not seen how the blockchain actually looks like, this is it. You can put in you can go on www.blockchain.com and see every transaction associated with a public address. So I put a public address here, and you see all the transactions below in which people have sent Bitcoin to this address. The whole world can see this. Money can only move if there's enough money from one destination to send to another, but nobody knows who's behind this. Up close, this is actually how each transaction looks. It is just from one public address to another and the ultimate value. Now, I will tell you what this address belonged to. It actually belonged to this group, the Syria Mujahideen, fundraising for terrorist purposes, asking for donation by Bitcoin. So the Department of Justice filed actions against these Bitcoin addresses and the addresses donating to this cause, because on the blockchain, all you could see was this quasi-anonymous nature of what the addresses were controlled by. It wasn't until later intelligence and investigations that people were able to figure out this was actually for the Mujahideen. And so this has been one demonstrated example where virtual currency has been used illicitly. The second, contraband being sold on the dark web. Now, in brief, the dark web is the part of the internet that is not searchable by Google or Bing or Amazon. It still resides on computers around the world like the internet does, but you need special encrypted software to access it. It's called the Onion Router or Tor. It's a browser. And the way the browser works is it hides your internet identity, your IP address. So you can log on to a website. The website does not know your IP address, and you don't know the IP address of the website. So it allows these websites to exist in anonymity. And here's one example of a website that used to exist called Wall Street Market. This was basically an e-commerce website. And because it was accessible only through encrypted software, and because they had designed themselves to try to avoid identity and scrutiny, they're able to sell this in the open. So if you look on the left, you can buy drugs, you can buy cardingware, which is credit cards. And then I put a call out, malware. This is how easy it is to get that malware that probably makes you stay awake at night about that could be infecting your company's systems. And if you look, the only way you can pay for this contraband is through Bitcoin or Monero, to cryptocurrencies. And that's because they themselves have anonymous nature. It wouldn't make sense to advertise the sale of cocaine on a website and say, please give me your KNet ID, or please wire your funds to me, because then all your anonymity is gone the minute you do a regulated bank transfer. So these websites take advantage of decentralized quasi-anonymous cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin and Monero. Wall Street Market was in operation until March 2019. It is a website that I worked on investigating with 2 other countries, and it took us about 2 years to find the location of Wall Street Market and to find those who were operating it. The servers for Wall Street Market were based in a former bunker that was once controlled by NATO in Germany. It was a bulletproof bunker that had its own hosting services, own communication services, and that bunker then allowed people to just run servers without needing to know what they were doing and advertising that they were self-hosted. And so you had malign websites such as Wall Street Market taking advantage of that loophole. So this is something else that we see in illicit use of cryptocurrency, is buying contraband on the dark web, not only for people to buy it, but people to also sell it. If you create malware, you can easily sell it this way. Another situation we see is hacking. So many companies may get hacked, and all that personal information just gets put on the dark web because this is the market to buy it. So you can have people buying credit card IDs, cell phone numbers, etc., for $20 an identity, and sometimes they will provide a full package. So in the United States, a social security number with a driver's license and a phone number. The criminal has somehow hacked multiple databases to sell you a full package of a person's identity. You can then take that identity, open up a bank account, set up an Apple ID, whatever it may be. You don't even know who that is, but you were able to buy it on the dark web. So this is all regular criminal activity, but the use of cryptocurrency has made it easier to do, both selling and buying. Another example dealing with terror finance is that cryptocurrency, in the first screenshot that I've shown you on the right, this was another example that was advertised on the dark web. You could fund ISIS straight by sending Bitcoin to that address. But because of its anonymous nature, the Department of Justice has charged cases where people have used cryptocurrency to hide the source of money. So for those who love watching Netflix and shows like The Ozark or Narcos, to see how classic money laundering is done is you need to mask another activity. So you have money from an illegal source, and you pretend to operate a salon or a business, and when you deposit money, you say it's from that salon. So now people are using cryptocurrency instead of having to set up a business. They will take money illegally, they will convert it to cryptocurrency, convert it back, and then deposit it and say it's for my cryptocurrency sales. And sometimes people don't ask the question of where the money came from. So we've also seen terror financiers use cryptocurrency to obfuscate, to hide the pattern of their funding. And then the last example that I must, of course, review with this group is ransomware. Earlier this year, the Colonial Pipeline in the United States, a critical oil pipeline, was basically held hostage. Their computer systems were locked, and it was in exchange for the ransom was for Bitcoin. This is not from this case, the screenshot that I'm showing you, but criminal groups use screenshots like this all the time, saying that your network is locked unless you pay us a certain amount of Bitcoin. It's going to remain locked, and you're going to lose your business. You're going to lose your crown jewels of your company and your market. And so this is, again, ransomware has existed for a while. It used to be kidnapping people or valuable objects, but now through the prolific use of malware and how easy it is to get from the dark web, and through the anonymous payment of cryptocurrency, it just makes the criminal job easier. If you were the criminal actor and you said, please bring me cash under this bridge, you would be for sure expecting 100 police officers around the area watching undercover who's going to drop this bag of cash. But with cryptocurrency, it takes a little bit more effort to investigate those types of crimes. So, and then the next point too, of an example of money laundering is through business email compromise. So this isn't anything that's really sophisticated. It's not, deploying malware. It's not hacking into a computer system. It's simply just fooling people. So let's say you had a real estate transaction and a couple wishes to buy a house. That couple has a realtor, and you can easily find out who an agent is by going onto these real estate websites. And in the bottom left, let's say the actual email was jim@realtorforyou.com. You have criminal actors who may slightly use different domains, such as the 3 examples I gave. But when the email shows up, just the nickname will show, not necessarily the actual email. Many of you know this. And so the couple will see this. This is the wiring instructions. They think it's their real estate agent, and they send money. But then that money is controlled by a criminal. And I've shown ways in which that money then gets laundered, because they will then exchange it into Bitcoin, do cash orders, or send it to another bank, usually offshore and outside of the control of investigating countries. And then they get the money that way. So this just facilitated a way of doing traditional crime. So this is another way where we have seen virtual currency used illegally. So the question is, where does one get it or cash it out? Is for some of you who have cryptocurrency or know about it, no. There are a variety of ways. You can go to an established exchange. When I mean established, those who are saying that they're doing business as exchanges for Bitcoin or KD. I've given 3 examples on the top. There are also websites where people are marketing their services. So the bottom screenshot is from a website called localbitcoins.com. I went to that website last week. I said that I wanted to find people who are exchanging for Kuwaiti dinar, and these profiles came up. If I click on each profile, I can see their phone number, they will give me their email, and as you can see in payment methods, they support a whole bunch of payment methods. If you have NBK, KNet, national bank transfers, they'll take it. And so in some cases, what these people are is they just have a shell company. And they may tell the bank, you know, I'm selling antiques or I'm selling collectible items, but really, and that's what these items are for. That's what these transfers are for. But really what they're doing is exchanging Bitcoin and sending Bitcoin in exchange. The last example of where one can get it is through Bitcoin ATMs. On the right, you'll see an example of where you can just go up to an ATM, you can put in dollars and get show your QR code for your phone, and the Bitcoin will be sent to you, or you can send Bitcoin to the machine and dollars will come out. So with all of these examples that I've given you of how cryptocurrency has been used illegally, they all funnel down to one critical point, and that is the actual exchange of money. So in even though virtual currency is pretty prominent and many vendors accept it, at some point, people are going to want to exchange it for traditional currency, for the dollars, for the dinars, etc. And so what we have been doing is prosecuting and investigating these illicit exchanges. Because at least on the Bitcoin side of things, because it is not centralized, because there is no institution, there's nobody there doing due diligence on the customer. If you want to open a regular bank account, you have to show your ID, you have to show income statements, you have to give a phone number, you have to give an email. That's not necessarily the case with Bitcoin. You can acquire it very easily. Or if you mine it and create it, or if you get it from a friend, nobody knows. There's nobody you can go to saying, what's the identification tagged to this address necessarily. So what our financial intelligence unit did in 2013 was announce a rule that if you are exchanging virtual currency for regular currency, you are essentially an exchange company. You must have an anti-money laundering program. You must get the identity of a person. And so that's why if, for example, you wanted to exchange dinar for Bitcoin with Coinbase, which is based in the United States, they will ask you for your ID, for another bank account, for your email address, for your phone number, because they are doing their due diligence because the US government requires them to do so. So we basically, the United States, told these companies, even if you're a person exchanging this on the side in a Starbucks or an ATM machine, you must still comply with these requirements. And this principle has now been adopted by the Financial Action Task Force, which is an international body on rules governing money laundering and the financing of terrorism, for which Kuwait has its evaluation scheduled late next year or next year. And this is something that the whole world is trying to adopt, because then that way, hopefully we will be in a position where even though we don't know who is behind a cryptocurrency address, at some point they will need to do a transaction at an institution. And that institution should have the information as to who was behind a cryptocurrency address. So now, when you have a rule, not everyone necessarily follows it, right? So I will tell you now about a case that I prosecuted dealing with Bitcoin Maven. So Bitcoin Maven was somebody who advertised on that website, localbitcoins.com. This example in the lower part of the screen. This was snapshots from her reviews. When you would click on Bitcoin Maven, you would see that she had been on the website for 5 years. She was verified. She had a high level of activity. People liked transacting with her. She advertised on this website. And then when we looked on the government databases, in violation of this rule that you have to register and be an exchange company, essentially, she was not registered. And she was not doing the required filings that every other financial institution does. So for example, we would have undercover detectives go to her and exchange cash for Bitcoin. She didn't file a transaction report. You know, similar in Kuwait, in the United States, if you have high levels of cash transactions, a report is filed. Doesn't mean anything is wrong, but just it signals to the government that a lot of cash has been involved in one transaction. She wasn't doing that. And in the course of our investigation, as she admitted to the court, she was then, it's because she was exchanging for people who were using Bitcoin for illegal purposes. So there was a large scale drug seller who was selling drugs on the darknet and exchanged money through her. And one reason why criminals were using this service to launder money and to exchange cryptocurrency is because if you do not have somebody asking for their ID, this allows you to further protect anonymity. And so this is the reasoning not only behind the rule about requiring an anti-money laundering policy, but also why we prosecute that. And this is a criminal penalty when you know of the requirement and you intentionally don't follow it. For some people like her, there is higher profit to be made. If you, and I'll give you another example of that. ATMs. So this was another example of how you can get and exchange Bitcoin for dollars. This was a company known as HEROCOIN, and that was the type of ATM that I showed you. And this is how the ATM works. 4 simple steps. You say you want Bitcoin, you scan a QR code, you can send it, and you insert cash to get it. It's that easy. Now, if you notice this ATM in particular, let's say I was an illegal criminal who got money from selling drugs on the darknet, and I walk up to this machine and I sent my Bitcoin and I got cash back. Based on this ATM alone, nobody would know that I just laundered all that money. This ATM got the commission, and I was able to then get dollars and go spend it, and it was not traceable. Notice this ATM doesn't have a camera, doesn't have a required fingerprint. When we go to ATMs, we have to put in our bank ATM card that is tied to a bank account. That's not the case here, because all someone did was come with a Bitcoin address. And as I showed you, that can be anonymous from the public perspective. There's no institution maintaining that. So HEROCOIN, this is a map of Southern California. HEROCOIN operated 16 different locations all around Southern California. This one individual managed all these ATM machines. None of them had ID requirements. Maybe a little later in the investigation, some did ask for a driver's license, but it didn't have a camera. So nothing would prevent me, for example, to take Dana's ID card and flash it in front of an ATM. Unless you have a machine that's actually verifying is the ID belonging to the person who's actually doing the transaction, what's the use of asking for the ID, especially if it's from a machine? And then the HEROCOIN, there was no connections between multiple locations. So if the rule was that you had to file a report for a transaction over $3,000, all I could do was go to one machine, do $2,000, go to another machine, do $2,000, and not get a report filed on me. And that was easy to do because if nobody was asking for my ID, then how would you know that it's the same person? Then this ATM company was also asking for 20 to 25% commission for every transaction. Some of those other exchanges that I told you about, where you have to show your ID and ask for and give your banking information, charge 3 to 5% commission. So think of it this way. If you were a criminal who has a lot of Bitcoin from illegal activities and you want to launder it, meaning you want to exchange it into cash or you want to transfer it somewhere, do you go to the bank that asks for all your ID and charges 3% commission, or do you go to a place that doesn't ask for your ID and charges 20% commission? That was worth it for a criminal actor because they didn't have to give their ID or get reported to the government, and they can avoid their income taxes if they wanted to. I'm just giving one example of laundering money, but people then don't have to pay taxes if they don't show their identity. So this is another business that was set up to allow criminals to exchange money without any identification. So I prosecuted the operation of this business. And so this, I'm now going to talk. So this is just a set of examples of how I have prosecuted the illegal use of cryptocurrency. Because going back to some of these examples, it may be hard as an investigator to go after each anonymous Bitcoin address. But in the end, we know that they are going to want to exchange money. So one mechanism is to go after that exchange point. Because if eventually all these exchange companies will ask for IDs, the desirability of using Bitcoin for illegal usage is going to decrease because there is no place to actually exchange it without then revealing who you are. So this is one example. About 2 years ago, the Department of Justice issued a cryptocurrency framework, enforcement framework that describes the different regulatory approaches. And one that I've just highlighted is regulating the exchangers of cryptocurrency. Not only requiring from the administrative side, requiring them to get customer information, but then prosecuting them if they have failed to follow those requirements and they have the criminal intent to do so. And then our framework also talks about how we've enforced it in the tax setting, the securities, which is equivalent to capital markets. So that's the first part of my presentation was talking about high-tech money laundering, which is using cryptocurrency. I've given a basic overview. As you know, we've prosecuted more of these cases. The criminals try to outdo it. But I wanted to signal this to you as professionals in the cybersecurity realm, because you more likely than others will be facing people or facing threats dealing with cryptocurrency. And so just understand this is part of the ecosystem where it comes from, which is the illegal use of it. Again, there are some people who are using it and trying to use it positively, but there's an illegal use for it too. So as you know, I think many people understand when you say cybersecurity, you deal with cyber, sometimes you turn into the IT. For people, and people will ask you, should we use cryptocurrency as payments? You know, just understand that if you're moving towards that model, that there are these risks associated with it. And so for this, for those people who are in the banking sector that are here or financial institutions, there is a responsibility for your anti-money laundering compliance to make sure that the cryptocurrency you're accepting and transacting with isn't coming from these sources, because people can be giving you cryptocurrency, but it could be coming from illegal sources. So very much like the banking industry having its anti-money laundering departments as the front line of making sure that illegal money doesn't come through the banking system, there is a similar call to action on the cryptocurrency front. So that is the high-tech money laundering part. So now let me briefly talk about the cybercrime part. I'm going to give you a case that was charged in Los Angeles, not by me, but colleagues in my office. These were just charges. There is no convictions. And so, you know, in the United States, people are innocent until proven guilty. But it's alleged state-sponsored infection of computers. So in 2014, Sony Pictures in Los Angeles was hacked. Information from Sony's computers were released. Some was deleted. And so it was on the eve of the release of a film about North Korea. So you can guess where I'm going with this. The same defendants as the charging documents outline showed that there was an attempt to steal $1.2 billion from banks around the world from 2015 to 2019 by replicating SWIFT messages. So as you know, banks send money through the SWIFT network. There was computer malware that basically attempted to mock the SWIFT transfer to get money to leave a bank. And then there were these series of coordinated spear phishing attacks for 4 years that targeted critical companies in the United States. As the investigation unraveled, these are, if you look at this conduct that I've described, this is very different cyber criminal conduct, alleged conduct. A movie industry, a banking industry, and government contracting. But as the investigation unraveled, it turned out that it was all controlled. It is alleged to have been controlled by the same set of actors who were connected to the military intelligence agency of North Korea. And so this is something that was part of the public charging documents that showed how this all linked together. And so on the top, you have common emails that were used. They shared a lot of properties in common. But at the bottom, you'll see that there was common traits at the different malware that was deployed for these victims. And this is the part that I wanted to highlight to the private sector, which is you. When you get an attack, I know your first priority is how do we mitigate the damage? But the second part is sharing that information with the government and with the broader community, because you don't want others to face that attack. That's one part. But the second is, for all you know, it could be part of a larger scheme. And the only way you can help government investigators and prosecutors know that is having that dialogue. So could you imagine if none of these victims were to take forensic images of the malware that was deployed or didn't share this information? One may not know the larger picture or the larger attacks that were at issue towards a country. So that's what transitions me to resilience, the role of the private sector. As you all know, for your companies, you're promoting your employees to have cyber hygiene. Watch the emails you come from, don't click on these links, have safe passwords, etc. But the other part of it, at least in the United States, is we have a shared knowledge base. Our CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, publishes these malware reports as these investigations come to a close. So I have an excerpt from that website at the bottom. The North Korea remote access tools and Trojans that the United States had discovered, that code is on there for you to develop patches, make sure that they're in patches, or if you have a similar malware tool to see whether if it's maybe one that had infected someone else. And then the third point is what I just talked about, the public and private collaboration. InfraGard is an association that the FBI runs in the United States. And you can go, and I've given a description of what they offer, that when they are members of this community in the United States and outside, and this is what is open to them. Because as Dana opened this presentation, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. But I think you all are uniquely positioned to help the charge on protecting your country, on protecting your company, and protecting your community. Which leads me to the last point and why I applaud all of you for going to these types of meetings, to have preparedness and technical competence for the response. Each cyber attack is always a different response. You know, you're dealing with your public, your customers, any regulatory laws that you need to comply with, but more importantly, understanding how the private sector plays a role to protect the country in that respect. And particularly, we've learned that COVID has required more of society to move online. More is at stake, and the stakes are higher. You know, in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, Zooms were hacked with kids in classroom. We had instances where adults were exposing themselves to children online in Zoom. That hurts our children. You have hacks of critical services companies. That hurts our business. You have hacks of governments. That hurts our national security as well. So this is the array of threats that we have. And so cybercrime from that perspective is important in its own right. But then also at the end, it's all about the money. And we're now seeing that cyber criminals are taking advantage of virtual currency in the ways that I have described. So that's it from me in terms of, you know, the perspective of where we come from. And I'm happy, you know, I want to say thank you again for all of your participation. If you don't mind, maybe I can just go through some of the questions that have come in the chat before we do a breakout. So let me go up. The first one is if the service does not enforce the law and the user does not observe the regulations, either because they don't know, then is the user or the launderer, do they get charged with a crime? So I think what I understand the question to be is, let's say I'm exchanging cryptocurrency for dollars and I go to one of those exchangers. I mean, in theory, they're probably not committing a crime if their cryptocurrency is not from illegal usage. So let me give an example. Let's say that I get cryptocurrency as a gift, and that is what is told to me. And I know it is just a gift. It's from my sister. She's like, here's token Bitcoin because you like talking about it so much. And if you please stop talking about it, I'll give it to you. So she gives it to me. I want to exchange that for cash because I just want more money.
Guidance to your destination.
So someone's driving, so what I would do is, if I go to one of these services, there's nothing that obligates me as a private citizen.
Take the second.
There's nothing that obligates me as a citizen to have to go to a regulated exchange. But on the flip side, most of these unregulated places are charging higher commissions. So if I have nothing to hide, it's more in my incentive to go to a regulated exchange. That's one reason. The second reason is that, for every crime, there's criminals exploiting criminals. In the beginning, in 2016, 2017, on this website, you had people say that they are exchanging Bitcoin for dollars. And the way that they would go is they'd meet at a Starbucks to do the exchange. What they really were was they were thieves. And so someone would show up thinking they're exchanging for Bitcoin, and really they were held at gunpoint for their money. So it's also not secure. So if you have if you have money that you're not ashamed about exchanging, in theory, you're going to want to go to a regulated place because it is safer and it is cheaper. Okay, so the next question I got was, when is it illegal? How could ATMs be in full public view? So to be clear, the ATMs are not illegal on their own, just like these exchanges are not illegal on their own. It is that if there's an ATM that is not doing diligence on the customer, that's what makes it illegal. So, these ATMs were out in the public for a while, and, we were investigating them during that time. So we allowed them to operate illegally during the course of our investigation, but that was to collect enough evidence. Finally, when we collected enough evidence, we then seized all those ATMs, publicized the case, and hopefully that has encouraged other operators to be compliant with the law. The next question I have is, one of the most important CISA rules is not to provide internet service to everyone in an organization. I don't think that one's a question, so I think that's a comment. So there's a question about CISA, which unfortunately I can't answer because I'm not with CISA, about measures that they take about tracking and bringing down threat actors. So if you have questions about CISA, I encourage you to go to their website. That's run by the Department of Homeland Security. I do know that they help us in terms of collaborating this information and publicizing it. So those are all the chat questions. There's a request about a question by voice, so I defer to Dana for you to control the room at this point. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity and for listening to this this evening. Thank you so much.
There's a hand up right now, Roland. I think
Yes.
there's only 20 people here, so I think we can go ahead with group Q&A and discussion. So Roland, go ahead.
Yes, hello, how are you? First, thank you for the great session. Actually, it is really amazing. My question is that during the presentation, the speaker mentioned about the case of the US pipelines when it comes to the ransomware attack happened there, and the request for payment using Bitcoin. But the idea is that the request for payment was for $5 million. And we all know that by that time, the FBI and CIA and all legal and agencies in US governments, they went and took part of this case, and they were able to get a big amount of the money already paid via ransomware. So my question is that, since we already discussed the fact that all payments done or paid via Bitcoin are unidentified and so on, so how they were able to trace the payments done and to get them back?
Okay, that's a great question. And I am going to just give a general answer because that's an ongoing investigation, which I don't have a part in, so I can't answer about that specific case. But you have seen in the news, you know, and the department, our cases, we publicize how we can get money back. We've seized cryptocurrency. Law enforcement does have its mechanisms to trace cryptocurrency and intelligence to trace cryptocurrency. This comes from prosecuting it, from intelligence information, getting information from exchanges. If we know that a cryptocurrency has gone to a certain exchange, we can kind of find out where it went. There's other parts of an investigation too that give you a sense of who the illegal actor is. So it's not impossible. You know, we as prosecutors and investigators will always learn the methods of criminal usage. So to be clear, you know, all of our enforcement actions show to criminals that even though they've used new technology, we are able to understand that technology and beat them at their game at it.
Okay, Roland? Did you understand?
So
Roland?
basically, it's clear. So just as quick brief. So even though, as you are saying that the blockchain is secure and Bitcoin, there is no idea and it cannot be traceable. So US government have its own mechanism in order to be able to trace them, right?
Roland,
I think, yeah.
if I could interject, Roland, who told you that Bitcoin or BitChain was secure? Where did you get that idea?
No, actually, when we are talking about blockchain and security, we are talking about end-to-end encryption. We are talking about there's nothing called 100% secure, but at least we are talking about the technology blockchains that if you want to hack it, you need, let's say, to hack it using 51% to hack the blockchain. But this, for example, cannot be done for Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. It can be done for a small blockchain and so on. So, but the idea here is that based on all the things that were mentioned during the presentation, that the use of cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, for paying for ransom, for paying in the dark web and so on, it's because it's not easy to track, like, for example, when you are tracking a bank transfer. So now what I understood is that for the US government, they also have their own mechanism in order to track all cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and to track blockchain, even it is encrypted and secure up to a certain level.
So, okay, I understand your question. So what I'll say is this, is that governments do have the ability to trace Bitcoin and to track it. You know, but it takes work. And so there is that aspect. And I think when you were talking about the 51%, I think when sometimes when cases talk about seizures of cryptocurrency, it's not from the network necessarily. It is from a criminal actor who may have had it, or from a bank that is holding the private keys for it. So sometimes seizures, sometimes there are crypto exchange companies that are holding on to Bitcoin that do not know that it came from an illegal purpose. And we then present a warrant to seize that money and we get a judge's approval to seize it. So that's, I think maybe that may have caused some confusion. So it's not like the government is controlling the Bitcoin network. It is that there are mechanisms just like any other bank where we can seize funds when we have proved that they're tied to a crime. We do in the cryptocurrency context as well.
Yeah.
Can I have just one last question? A quick,
Sure,
very quick
course,
question.
Roland. You can have pretty well as many as you want.
Okay, thank you. Again, as far as I understood from the presentation, that the US government, or at least what I understood, is that they don't have any problem using cryptocurrencies to buy any other cryptocurrency and so on, but they are trying to control the fact when anybody is trying to materialize or cash back the cryptocurrency into a real cash or transfer to a bank account, or even to go and buy something at Starbucks. So is this correct? So when you are using cryptocurrency to buy another cryptocurrency, it's fine. But as long as it is a cryptocurrency, you cannot use it unless you want it as a cash in your hand.
No, I don't think I said that at all. To be clear, one, I don't speak for all of the United States laws. We have 50 states with 50 different laws. And, you know, when you say, if I could just use one cryptocurrency to buy another, there's 1,000 more questions about that. Where is your cryptocurrency from? Do you know that it's from an illegal purpose? Do you know that you're buying something illegally? So I don't think I can give a very black and white answer to that question. What I can say about this is that the use of cryptocurrency is not by itself illegal. And we care about exchanges in as much as that's what allows people to exchange cryptocurrency for regular money. And so that is one area where we have had criminal cases because that is an easy area of money laundering. There are 1,000 of other cases and examples where cryptocurrency is used illegally that have been prosecuted. I'm only just talking about one example of money laundering this evening.
Anything else?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, if you think of some more, please let us know, Roland. Good to see you here. Are you still teaching at the Technical Science and Technology College?
Yes, yes. But just by the way, to introduce quickly myself, I was consultant for the Ministry of Information in Kuwait for Sheikh Salman Ahmed Sabah, and I'm also a cybersecurity consultant, and I'm a university instructor at AUST, American University of Science and Technology.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, thank you for your questions. They were very great, and so yeah, I can't ever. It's always hard to answer these questions in black and white, right? Because it's very dynamic, and so. You know, and that's the one thing that is the unfortunate part about being virtual and even within an hour, right? Is that sometimes there are more questions than answers. So I apologize that it's more of a summary nature.
The idea is that based on what you said, since Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies that can be controlled, why so far ransomware it cannot be controlled, and all ransomware attack and everything is now still being paid via Bitcoin?
But
so
I don't think I
weird,
said
right?
yeah, but I don't think I said that it can be controlled. And that, like, I think by definition, the technology of Bitcoin cannot be controlled. It's a decentralized network. Just like how you cannot control cash, you can trace it after things have happened. You have a sense of where things go. And so I think what I was trying to get at was cryptocurrency is a new way of doing old crimes. And so just as we have traced regular finances, we are also tracing cryptocurrency, albeit in different methods, but we can't control cryptocurrency. Situations where we seize cryptocurrency, we generally need to have control over the private key. You can't just see a public address and seize the cryptocurrency. Again, it's a decentralized network.
One thing we have to remember, Roland, is that whenever we hear that there's an investigation and they were successful in tracking the perpetrators and seizing cryptocurrency, a lot of effort and money went into that. So, you know, sometimes people feel that the US government is all powerful. Actually, the US government has a lot of power, but not endless budget, you know, and they have to prioritize what they're going to go after, what they're going to spend money on. So when they ask Puneet to prosecute a case, somebody has to pay him for doing that. And the people who did the investigation, somebody has to pay for that. And that's the US taxpayer who is paying their taxes to pay for these investigations. So, you know, it's not that it's easy to control. No, it's not easy to control, and it's costly to control. And the controls that are there are more to do with stopping people, tracking the people who are perpetrating the crimes and stopping them, seizing their Bitcoin, as Puneet said, through the cyber bank, that where, you know, people didn't realize they were holding illegal cryptocurrency, something like that.
Right.
So why not banning Bitcoin and banning mining like in China?
I don't think it's banned in the United States. Each country has its own approach that they're, you know, currently dealing with. So that's more of a policy discussion. Yeah.
So I'd like to know, no other hands are up, so I get to ask a question. I'm curious about the situation in Kuwait. I realize you have to be diplomatic in what you say, but I would like to know if there are any Bitcoin ATMs in Kuwait. I haven't seen any. I know there are some companies that are exchanging Bitcoin, and I've seen them at conferences. So how would you describe the the whole blockchain cryptocurrency situation here in Kuwait. What do you see happening, and what regulations do we have, and what regulations do we need?
So I think the Kuwaiti government has made a great step recently. I think they issued a public advisory about, the risks of Bitcoin, because, I've talked about it from the illegal usage. In the United States, we also have a public protection usage. The volatility of Bitcoin is so high. Just over the weekend, it dropped $20,000. And, in the United States, when you have volatile investments, if someone caused that volatility, they can be sued because they did something to intentionally tamper with value. You don't have that with Bitcoin. And so I think Kuwait wisely is protecting its citizens and its population, advising them, saying that this volatility could happen. And I know that the central bank issued a statement in May. And then I think maybe last week, end of November, the central bank issued saying that they are studying this approach. So I think that's great. And I think Kuwait is proactively addressing this situation. I think, every country is trying to understand how they need to comply with AML requirements. I think that is now a generally understood standard, particularly because the Financial Action Task Force has made it part of their governing standards. So countries are now being evaluated on the degrees to which countries are embracing these principles. And so I think, I've been having these types of engagements with my counterparts here, and I think it's great that Kuwait is also thinking about it too.
So are you mostly interacting with the central bank or Ministry of Finance, or?
I'm here as a prosecutorial aspect. And so, obviously when people ask me about my experience here, I'm happy to share it. And it's, I think Kuwait on its own is coming up with this. I by no means am the one giving that. When people ask me for advice or presentations, I give it in these types of forums. I usually work on general criminal justice types of workshops and stuff.
Okay, great. Okay, folks, great. Any other questions? So, Puneet, about the law in Kuwait, can you give us just a rough overview of the law and regulatory environment as it pertains to the cryptocurrencies?
I think, the most that I am aware of, I'm learning the laws here. I'm not the expert here. I know the US laws like no other, but I think, what the government has been announcing seems to be the latest on it. And so I defer to how Kuwait has been public about its laws and regulations.
Have you seen anyone in Kuwait who you would recommend as a speaker for us, who can speak about Kuwait law, etc.?
Yeah, I do. We can chat offline
Okay.
if you have any certain topics. There are
Okay.
people that I've met, but the Kuwaiti lawyers are very skilled here, and I know their prosecutors are incredibly intelligent
Yeah.
that I've worked with.
Yeah, because I mostly know human rights lawyers here, not the.
I see.
Yeah. Okay, great. Folks, any other final, I see we have lost a few people. I'm sure that they got an earful because, wow, what a great presentation. We really got
Thank
a
you so
huge
much.
amount of information, and we really appreciate it a lot, Puneet. So folks, here's your last opportunity for a question.
Yes, it was a very interesting subject, and thank you for the time to being here and the information you have shared with us, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. If there's any follow-up questions later, you can send to me. We're all connected together by WhatsApp. You can send me questions and I'll send them to Puneet. And I'm sure he'll help us out if he can.
Happy to do so. Well, thank you for having me. Look forward to meeting you in person.
It was an amazing presentation, just amazing. And I think that this recording is going to get a lot of hits.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
We'll say
Thank you very
goodbye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Have
you
a nice
for being here. Bye-bye.